Sure. So, look, we're living through probably the biggest medical scandal today is that there's a sudden spike in these teenage girls out of nowhere medically transitioning. All of a sudden, they want hormones and surgeries, and they're easily obtaining them. And I wrote a book about it. And because two Twitter users decided the book was transphobic, they called it that to Target. Target removed it.
I'm Dave Rubin, and this is the Rubin Report. Joining me today for a long overdue interview is author of the new book, Irreversible: Damage, the Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters. Abigail Shrier, welcome to the Rubin Report.
Thanks so much for having me on.
So the book came out in June and kind of caught fire in June, and then I was going to have you on in August, and I went off the grid. And then, there was election stuff, so I didn't have you on. And then a couple weeks ago, all hell broke loose because Target tweeted that they were going to no longer carry the book. So let's just start with the controversy, because actually the reason I'm having you on right now is that after the controversy, the book absolutely sold out everywhere, and we had to hold this interview so that the book would be stocked again. So a lot's going on. So let's just start with the controversy first, because what you write about here in the transgender craze is really like the hot topic of the day and the thing that seems to get the most people in hot water. So what happened with Target? Let's start there.
Sure. So, look, we're living through probably the biggest medical scandal today is that there's a sudden spike in these teenage girls out of nowhere medically transitioning. All of a sudden, they want hormones and surgeries, and they're easily obtaining them. And I wrote a book about it. And because two Twitter users decided the book was transphobic, they called it that to Target. Target removed it. And people were very upset. The book has a lot of grassroots support. A lot of parents feel like it really explained the story of what happened to them when their teenagers suddenly out of the blue decided with their friends that they were transgender. And they were really upset. And a lot of people wrote to Target, and Target, reinstated it. It was, one of the few victories, I think, against cancel culture.
Yeah, you must have been pretty enthused to see the amount of support that you got, because yeah, you get the usual Twitter haters and the anonymous accounts and all that stuff, pushing Target to a decision like this. But pretty much everybody that still stands on the side of free speech, I guess we don't have that many people anymore, but pretty much everyone that was around supported you to get this thing back, and it actually did work.
Yeah, I was very gratified. Look, there are literally hundreds of books out there promoting unskeptically the immediate medical transition of teenagers. If you want to read that book, there are hundreds you could read. And you know what? I certainly would never call for any of them to be banned, because I don't want to live in that kind of world. But there is exactly one book that did a deep dive into this phenomenon of teenage girls suddenly transitioning, and it's my book. And for the activists, even one book is too many.
Yeah, okay, so let's start with the most important question. Let's just get it out there right from the top. Abigail, are you a transphobe? Do you have an irrational fear of trans people? And is that why you wrote this book?
No, I wrote the book, first of all, because a reader wrote to me and she told me her daughter had gone through this phenomenon. And when she said her daughter had always been a girly girl, never had gender dysphoria, this is severe discomfort in one's biological sex. But when she got to high school, she had a lot of mental health issues, and she went off to college. And with a group of girlfriends, they all decided they were transgender, and she started a course of testosterone. And I tried to find another investigative journalist who would take it up, because I wasn't an investigative journalist, and I couldn't find one. So after 4 months, I finally got back in touch with her, and I said, all right, I'll do it. I mean, that's the world we're living in. And let me just say that a lot of transgender adults, and I interviewed a lot for my book, support the book. I mean, the book does not, I'm not against medical transition. It just urges caution when it comes to these teenage girls.
Okay, so just to be absolutely clear, and I know my audience totally
sure.
understands it, but so you don't have a problem with adults that transition, that make the choice in their lives to transition?
No, I mean, not only am I not against it, I've interviewed a lot of transgender adults. I believe it has helped. It can help. I know them. I've talked to them, and I'll tell you something else. I'm not even against all medical transition for teenagers. The only thing I show in the book is that the current medical regime has no medical judgment in place. It's totally based on the judgment of teenagers. And the doctors are told to affirm, 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 meaning they have to agree with the teenager's self-diagnosis. So there's no checks in place. So the current medical regime is really not safe for teenage girls.
Yeah, so I was trying to think how I wanted to conduct this interview because, this is one of the topics that we've touched on a bunch here, not because I particularly care about these issues as much as when it's become such a hot button issue, then it sort of gets to my plate. But I read the book and I thought that the way that you laid it out, just even in the chapters, the way you separated certain things was really good. So if you don't mind, we'll just go through chapter by chapter and discuss each one. So the introduction is about the contagion. And that's sort of what you're hitting on about what happened with your friend's daughter at college. Can you describe that?
Sure. So it's based on the research of Lisa Littman, as we'll talk about in the next chapter. But the public health researcher who looked into why there was a sudden and huge spike in teenage girls who claimed to have gender dysphoria. And this is not the population that traditionally had it. It was always males, and it usually began in early childhood. And all of a sudden, across the West, including America, we have this sudden spike of teenage girls deciding they're transgender, often with their friends, and often after the encouragement of social media influencers.
Mm-hmm. Right. So you talk about this a little bit later in the book, so I'm jumping ahead a bit, but you tell a story of a girl who, in essence, in high school, came out as transgender. There weren't a lot of issues that she was bringing up before that, but then suddenly she's getting more likes on Tumblr. She's now part of an oppressed minority at school and in different groups. And that allure, basically, and I know I'm getting a little ahead of ourselves here, but that allure, in a weird way, is what's fueling so much of this.
That's right. So it's young teenage girls. These are often white, middle or upper middle class girls. They're very precocious. But they are high anxiety and high depression girls. They have a lot of mental health issues. And for the first time, the moment they get to high school or middle school and decide they're transgender, it's the first time they get so much encouragement and love, especially online, and sometimes from adults. And some of these adults are not, are not up to very much good. But they get the showering of love and praise, and they don't want to walk away from that.
So chapter 1, which is about the girls that you're describing right there, we've talked a lot about, and I think I was on tour with Jordan Peterson for a year and a half, and he focused more so, I would say, on young men, but it was a message that obviously traversed, it didn't matter what gender you really were. But is there something specific going on with young girls that we're not aware of? Like, there does seem to be an emasculization of young boys that we see, but what do you think is happening with young girls?
Right. So teenage girls specifically fall for almost every one of these so-called hysterias. And the reason they do is they tend to take on their friend's pain. If a young man is depressed, very often his friend will say, okay, let's go play basketball or suggest doing something. But he won't say, what are you feeling? Tell me about your pain. And he won't start to take it on himself. He won't agree with his friend about how terrible life is just to make his friend feel better. But we know, and I interviewed a lot of psychologists about this, young women tend to not only take on their friend's pain, they're willing to distort reality in order to make their friend feel better. And so that's why they tend to, all of these, anorexia is spread this way. They tend to, take on whatever their friend's reality is, even if it's, oh, I'm too fat. Whatever they think will make their friend feel better, they'll take that on.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about women's issues instead of nonstop yelling, check out our Women's Issues playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, check out our full episode playlist. They're both right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.